Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the possibility of a very interesting merger. It has recently come up in some news outlets that the BBC and Channel 4 have supposedly been contemplating not just about joining forces on a project, but merging together entirely. Now, as to whether there's actually any truth in this or this is all hyperbole, we're going to check that out today. But even the prospect of that alone, you know, you hear that sentence that the BBC and Channel 4 might merge, and that's insane as a concept. So the article in question comes from The Guardian, the newspaper. It was written by Jim Waterson, who's their political media editor, with the headline, "More Cuts and a Merger with Channel 4. The BBC Contemplates Its Radical Future." Within days of her appointment as Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy met one of the few prominent BBC presenters who is not currently embroiled in a scandal, Hacker T-Dog, the puppet star of CBBC. And yes, here's a little picture of Lisa with Hacker. They did this little cute video together. I thought it was really sweet. It was just really wholesome, quite funny in places actually. And Hacker's been on CBBC for, I want to say, like 15 years now. He's been around a long time. In fact, here's a little clip of it.
Hello. Can I ask you a question? Have you got any legs? I've always wondered.
Got 4 of them, look, there's 2.
Are you really from Wigan?
Very much so, yeah.
Where's your favourite place in Wigan?
Hindley.
Well, that's the wrong bit.
Well, my stuff's there.
Hacker, I don't know if you remember, but you once met my little boy and made him cry.
Yes, I do.
You do? So very good.
No, where was that?
So I'm afraid I'm announcing today that I am shutting the BBC down.
Hooray! Good luck for getting your new job.
Bless you.
That's
Thank
exciting.
you. Yeah.
You're not leaving Wigan though, are you?
No.
You still live there?
Yeah, I'm going to move the BBC to Wigan actually.
I'd love that!
Is he always like this?
Yeah. I mean, normally it's much worse. There's normally much worse.
I'm your best behaviour today.
See, it's like very tongue-in-cheek, very wholesome, very silly, but that's what, you know, CBBC should be all about, that stuff, even if it's involving politicians. It says, watching this exchange between two Wiganers was the BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, who'll be hoping for a slightly different outcome from his future negotiations with Nandy. It's been no secret that the BBC's been in a very, sort of precarious position the past few years, you know, a lot of cuts, a lot of scandals, unfortunately, as well, and, you know, people abandoning the licence fee and the last government not really being committed on its future or not really being certain about it. Regarding the Director General, it says he now faces the single challenge that will define his legacy at the corporation, whether he can strike a deal with the government over the long-term financial future of the BBC. Negotiations over the future of the licence fee and whether it is retained in its current form or replaced with a subscription model or funded by a new tax are expected to begin in January, that's 2025, and last 2 years, with a deal needing to be in place by the end of the current Royal Charter in 2027. That date draws ever closer, my friends. You know, we say it's a long way away, but 2027 is going to be here before we know it, so they're going to need to use all of this time wisely to really come up with a good solution. Labour's election victory and Keir Starmer's vague commitment to the licence fee suggested the clouds may be parting for the BBC after 14 years of cuts by Tory-led governments. Yet one BBC insider warned, don't count your chickens yet, as the political threat is replaced by an acknowledged threat of irrelevance, with 500,000 households a year cancelling their TV licence. As a result, there's a growing acceptance that extreme thinking might be required to secure public service broadcasting. Now, 500,000 people a year dropping the licence fee, that's not a good figure. You know, there's no sugarcoating that. That is not a good figure. That is a very bad decline. And yes, you know, there's however many people in the UK, like 60, 70 million, stuff like that. So when you put it like that, it may seem like a drop in the ocean. But if this is a sustained decline, then that ain't good for the BBC in the future. And it's been no secret that the licence fee as is, you know, the sort of yearly payment of, what is it now, £169 or something like that. A lot of people aren't happy with that. A lot of people, those who claim they don't engage with BBC services all that often, you know, even though that covers things like radio as well as TV and then the website and everything else. So extreme thinking, I think, is going to come. And to be honest, if this downward trend continues, it makes me think more than anything that the licence fee in its current form probably will be abandoned come 2027. But as to what could replace it, who knows? One radical suggestion, here we go, is to consider merging Channel 4, which was threatened with privatisation by the Tories, with the BBC to create a public service television powerhouse. Two television industry sources have said that the BBC discussed a merger as part of the next round of licence fee negotiations. Now, again, that would be huge. BBC and Channel 4 combining to be this public service television powerhouse. What a concept. Such a move would combine two publicly controlled broadcasters, add $1 billion of revenue to the BBC's balance sheet, and could enable Channel 4's profits to subsidise other parts of the BBC, for sure. So if they merge with Channel 4, Channel 4 is obviously a commercially operated public service broadcaster, so revenue from advertisements could help, as it says, subsidise parts of the BBC and stuff like that. Channel 4, I guess, would gain the resources of the BBC, the vastly bigger resources that they have at their disposal. Phil Redmond, the veteran television executive who created Brookside and Hollyoaks for Channel 4, two very big soaps, is a proponent of a merger. He said that in the face of declining youth audiences, a deal between the BBC and Channel 4 would secure the long-term future of public service broadcasting in the UK. He said reforming the BBC has to include reforming Channel 4. The big debate is not about who is sitting in what desk, in what building. So, you've got some pretty high, well, not high up necessarily anymore, but, a very prominent person within the TV industry, a very respected person, calling for this merger. He said it could enable cost-cutting at Channel 4 and free up its budget to be spent on commissioning new programmes. You could get rid of a lot of the technical side, the admin, HR, finance, all that stuff can go. The only thing you'd keep is the sales team for a while, he added. Ultimately, commissioning new programmes, if more money can be allocated in Channel 4 to make those new programmes, I think that is, on the surface, a net good thing. The whole remit of Channel 4 originally was that it was to commission these new programmes, the kinds of programmes that none of the other broadcasters at the time, so just BBC and ITV, weren't willing to show. And even if it merges within the BBC, I would hope Channel 4 retains that sort of editorial independence, that sort of spirit that it always has had throughout its 40 years. It's ebbed and flowed for sure, but I think it has to retain that. And to commission new programmes that fit with the original mould of Channel 4, to be bold, to be brave, I think that would be an absolute must. Another commercial television executive said they had heard the BBC was looking at a merger with Channel 4 under which the commercial channel would operate as a semi-independent entity under BBC Studios, the corporation's for-profit subsidiary. If you're wondering, what does that mean? How would that work? Well, the article helps us out here by saying they said this could be similar to how the BBC owns UK TV, the parent company of Dave, which of course is now You. And such a move could soothe independent production companies worried about the commercial broadcaster's long-term financial future. Channel 4 could then act as a talent incubator for British formats created by BBC Studios that then could be sold all around the world. So this partnership with Channel 4 under BBC Studios, I sort of get what he's saying, because the independent companies, I guess, will have that sort of, not security, but that more reassurance about the commercial broadcaster's future in Channel 4. And Channel 4 has always sort of been this talent incubator, I think. The BBC and ITV and even Channel 5 are too, to some extent, but I really think over the last few years, Channel 4 still is sort of the leader with that, and that's something I'd want them to retain. Get new talent in the door. As nice as it is to see, the same famous faces roll through different programs, you've got to keep that new surge of talent coming from all backgrounds, from all corners of life. It's essential to the industry, absolutely essential. A BBC spokesperson said, "We do not recognise what you've put to us. There are no ongoing discussions regarding the acquisition of Channel 4, and nor are we developing a proposal to do so." A government source also said a merger of the two public service broadcasters was not a proposal we are currently considering. Now, you can read into this what you will. People, spokespeople, companies, all that, even governments, yes, even governments, they say stuff all the time to, sort of take the wind away, to divert the focus somewhere else, or basically just lie. So, at the minute, BBC is saying, we're not really recognising what you're saying, we're not planning on a merger of Channel 4 or an acquisition. A government source is also saying a similar kind of thing. Are they telling the truth? Is this all blatant cover? Who knows? I mean, in terms of have discussions happened, I could certainly see maybe at least one or two meetings having taken place where the idea was put forward. As to whether or not they actually developed it, I don't know. I'm not in the boardrooms. Another radical idea for the future of the BBC is mutualisation, with all licence fee payers given a stake in the broadcaster on a model similar to the cooperative group or a building society. Nandi, the culture secretary, proposed such a scheme during her 2020 leadership campaign, saying it would allow licence fee payers to decide the trade-offs that the BBC must make to secure its future, whilst ensuring the organisation is protected from meddling by politicians, withholding funding or appointing board members. So putting more onus into the hands of the licence fee payer, I don't necessarily disagree with that in principle, because, if we're the ones who are essentially paying for the BBC and paying for the service, then greater public, greater public input into what the corporation, produces, broadcasts, what it dedicates its time and resources to. I can see that for sure. But, by the same token, what might we lose along the way because of that? The BBC could also ask the government to pick up the bill for the World Service. This used to be subsidised by the Foreign Office as a tool of British soft power, but the cost was largely lumped onto licence fee payers as part of coalition-era cuts. Yet convincing the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, to hand over hundreds of millions of pounds for overseas broadcasting would be a tough ask, given the government's messaging about difficult decisions. Yeah, it's such a shame with the World Service, because I'm not talking about a tool of British soft power, like we are not a powerful country anymore. The British Empire no longer exists. We need to let that go, let it be. But the World Service, I thought, was useful for Brits living abroad. My parents lived abroad at one point, and, they used the World Service to keep in touch with news, to keep in touch with things going on back at home. So, yeah, I do think the World Service is a useful tool. And yes, it has been abandoned by the Foreign Office to be largely forced on the licence fee payer. And yet, I think it is right. Is Rachel Reeves going to turn around and give the Beeb all the hundreds of millions for the World Service? No. I think the World Service is going to have to just continue on as it is, and as to whether or not its impact will dwindle. If it does sort of round down and eventually disappear, I think that would be a great shame, because whether you like it or not, the BBC as a brand internationally, especially for like news and stuff, is very well respected and also very well trusted. Not perfect, not absolutely, but a lot of people in a lot of countries around the world know that brand and they associate it with high quality. So to lose the World Service, I think, would be a crushing blow just for broadcasting generally. The BBC's overall audience remains enormous, especially among the older age groups, but the future is less rosy. A growing number of young people barely engage with the broadcaster's content, undermining the long-term case for a universal licence fee. And this has always been the problem. A lot of these older broadcasters, particularly the public service ones, their audiences are there, but they're now getting older and older and older. And the younger audiences, they're being persuaded by stuff offered on YouTube, by stuff offered on TikTok and all the other social media. It's really difficult now to get that younger demographic in, whereas opposed to when I was a kid, the internet was around, yeah, but it was really before the advent of social media. So entertainment-wise, TV was the thing. So, I got into it via CBBC and then all the other channels from that. Less than half of British 16 to 24-year-olds watch any linear television in any given week, according to the latest Ofcom research, raising questions about how long the BBC can maintain dozens of separate TV and radio channels, and when it should start to close outlets and lump everything on its digital offering. This has been a question. How long are things going to operate? We already know some things are moving online as soon as next year. CBBC chiefly among them, BBC 4 as well. More things like Go. BBC 3 might move back online. Who's to say? Maybe even something like BBC 2. But like this research says, if less people are watching telly, less than half of 16 to 24-year-old Brits are watching telly, that is not a good figure. Not a good figure in the slightest. The combination of financial pressure and changing audience habits could force Davey and Nandi to envisage a radically different BBC, doing less with less, but still acting as a hub for British public service television output. In a sign of the times, this week the BBC began experimenting with using artificial intelligence to produce transcripts of BBC Sounds content, whilst also preparing for a further round of human job cuts in the autumn. Now, this thing about AI entering the industry, I think it can have its positive uses, but I think we still have to be very wary about how much influence it's going to have in the industry as a whole. As the minute you start hearing about AI writing things like scripts for programs, that's when we're in serious trouble. The hope for the BBC is that Nandi accepts warnings from the British media industry about the existential threat it is facing. The playwright, James Graham, responsible for the hit show Sherwood, last week told the Edinburgh Television Festival that the UK is being too complacent about the future of the BBC and other public service broadcasters. We will miss them if they ever go. And I think that's a very poignant way to end the article, and very poignant of us, really. People say, I don't use the BBC, I don't watch telly, but I'm telling you, if the BBC goes, we're going to notice and feel that in some way, shape or form. And it's one of our biggest cultural exports, especially in entertainment. So I think to lose that would be a crushing blow for all involved. So on the whole, it again casts this dark cloud about the future of the BBC. With the Channel 4 merger, again at the moment, based on this, it seems like that's not happening. Both the BBC and the government are quick to dismiss that, but I don't know. Could there be talks going on behind the scenes they don't want us to know about yet? Are things actually being discussed or said or mooted? Do you think a merger would actually work between the two? But yeah, the future for the Beeb still hangs in the balance. Obviously very curious to see what happens beyond 2027, re the license fee and stuff like that. Very curious to see which channels and services go online only. Again, we've got the list of some that already are, but are more going to follow. Watch this space, because it's coming over these next few years. It's going to come thick and fast. But that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please remember to leave a like. It really does help us out. And subscribe to the channel as well, because we'd love to have you aboard. Do you think a merger between the BBC and Channel 4 could work, or do you think it's just a bit of a pipe dream? Let me know your thoughts, but in the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Bruce Danton, Derek Chambers, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, Trev Hughes, Ajmac 200017, Deck, Evan Hart 41, Jen, Traffi, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Ted Elliott, Marnanel Thurman, John Wakefield, Kieran Boulton, and 40-something Manchild, our AMTV staff members.